This is Boneset, or Eupatorium perfoliatum, like the leaf is, the folium is perforated. Sometimes they break open like that. So it's kind of like its cousin cup plant. And that is a signature, first they go back and forth at a periodic rate there. That's a signature for periodic fevers or influenza and malaria, for which it is greatly used still. It's a very beneficial remedy for chilly, achy, ache bone type fevers in the North Country here. It's also used for dengue and yellow fever in the south. It's also used for setting bones, the signature being the way the leaf wraps around the stalk. And also, I don't want to pick this nice one, but you could just snap the plant off very easily. It snaps like a broken bone. Also, it's got the bone white flower, all of which is at least a memory device and perhaps a signal from God and Mother Nature that this is a great remedy for setting bones. Some know-it-all professor in the 19th century said, oh, it's not used for setting bones despite the name. It's really just used for these fevers with the ache and chill and the aching in the bones. I don't know how he knew that, by going around talking to everybody maybe, but it's used by various Indian tribes. I was up north speaking at White Earth Reservation, and they had a picture of the boneset and it looked about just like this, and they had the name Eupatorium perfoliatum. Then they had the name Boneset. Then they had the Indian name, the Ojibwe, Anishinaabe Ojibwe name. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, bone to repair. I was like, yeah, sure, it's not for setting bones. Whoever's made that up. It's excellent for setting bones. I've used it again and again and again. It has the intelligence to set bones. When bones are out of place, it'll get them in the right place. When they're all fractured and broken up, it'll get the right seams together, because bones extrude chemicals that want to attract other bones that are broken, the other part of the bone, back together again, like true love. They put out those chemicals. Oh, I want you back. And so they go and they get refitted again. And also it works with the osteoblasts. It stimulates the osteoblasts probably from our observations of it, because it really helps solidify and grow the bone quickly from the deep innards of the bone outward, whereas comfrey grows from the outside in, which is not as good. It causes callousing on the bone, a swelling or a callus, and it doesn't get as deep into the bone. Just a difference. You can use comfrey knit bone, it's called, with the boneset, but boneset by itself is vastly superior. Also, it helps with cartilage, cartilaginous, all connective tissue, even with the nerve sheath, so it can be good in mononucleosis, or excuse me, MS. It's been used in osteomalacia. The great expert on it, in my opinion, is one of the experts, because I know a lot of people are good at this herb. Richard Reardon, Professor Emeritus from Pepperdine University in the LA area, he's used it for osteomalacia, where the bone was eroded away in the horse, and it redeveloped the bone. And also in an MS case. And also for setting bones. Also my friend Phyllis Light, trained by her little old Cherokee grandmother for setting bones. For this remedy for healing bones. And so its uses are basically threefold. One, to set bones. Two, to settle that chill fever, where you got chill, fever. And third, to rebuild the system that's been devastated by chill fever, by malaria, with exhaustion, where the gallbladder reflexes are all a mess. Bile, biliousness, wrong time. When you don't digest, you're spitting up bile, and when you need to digest, nothing will come. This is an old-fashioned problem. We don't have it as much anymore. But remember that next time you get malaria. This plant and turtle's head and some of the other ones were used that way. We got a beautiful stand of it through this whole place here. We use the tops, about that much, whereas gravel root, we use the root. Gravel root is its cousin. They're somewhat interchangeable. Gravel root also heals broken bones. Then there's another cousin, white snake root, that grows on the uplands that we may get a chance to talk about. Okay.
Okay, here we have boneset, and it's not in flower yet, but it's still really easy to identify, because if you look at the leaves, they go right across from one end to the other, and the stem pierces up through them. So very, very distinct. And they're really heavily veined. They're fuzzy on top, the stem is fuzzy, and there's very few plants that you could confuse this with. Boneset used to be one of the most important herbs that you would want to have around. In fact, I've seen in books reference that, like, in New England, in the autumn, you know, the late summer, autumn, everyone would go out and stock up on tons of boneset, and it would be hanging from the rafters drying, because you would not want to go through the winter and not have this plant in your medicine chest, you know, that you would have available to you. And that's because it is such a good remedy for a lot of different fevers and flus and influenza. It's probably one of the specific influenza remedies. And a couple ways to think about what it does is, one, it's a diaphoretic. And a very general definition of diaphoretic that everyone can usually recite off the top of their head is, diaphoretics are herbs that help you sweat and help in breaking and treating a fever. And what I find is that's just too simple of a definition to really cover what they do. In physiomedicalism, they would break up herbs into being stimulating diaphoretics, things that stimulated circulation from the core outward to the periphery, or relaxing diaphoretics, things that relax. You know, sometimes when you get sick, you're all tense like this, okay? And if your muscles are tense like this and your body's trying to stimulate circulation out to the periphery, it can't get there because all that tension is resistance. So by helping you relax, it allows for that process to complete itself. You're also not always trying to stimulate sweating. Sometimes if someone's sweating too much, you would want to stop that sweating because they're dehydrating. Many diaphoretics, like most mints, are also both stimulating and relaxing at the same time. So it relaxes the resistance at the same time it stimulates outward circulation. Boneset is primarily relaxant in nature. And it's got a really specific symptom picture that I think of that it's good for. Is first, it feels like someone beat you up with a baseball bat, or maybe like you fell down a couple flights of concrete steps. Your whole body is just sore and achy, and even your bones hurt. The name Boneset is this object of a lot of academic debate. Some people say, oh, the name Boneset clearly comes from the fact it was used to treat breakbone fever, which was characterized by this really achy, painful sensation in the bones, and so they used this and it got named Boneset. Other people will say that Native Americans used this plant for helping to set bones. And the breakbone fever people will say, like, no, that's not true. This plant is not used to set bones. But I know people who use this to set bones. I've used it a little bit, but I know a lot of people who've had quite a bit of experience using this to set bones. And for me or for anyone to say, like, no, that's not the name, it's only this name, I think that both can be true, you know? And besides that, I think that the debate is rather academic and it necessarily doesn't matter a whole lot. Certainly not worth arguing about. But that indication, though, that sore, achy feeling, is something that would make you immediately think of Boneset. Another thing that I think of is alternating fever and chills. So the person is like, oh, they're hot and sweaty, and oh, I feel so hot and sweaty. And so they throw off their covers because they feel stifled. And then they feel, ooh, cold and chilled, okay? Oh, they got the chills. And so they put the covers back on. And then they feel, in a few moments later, hot and sweaty and stifled again. And so they're doing this covers on, covers off, covers on, and they're alternating between cold and chilled and shivery versus like, oh, overwhelming heat, stifled. That alternating pattern is something that's good for Boneset. And chills, you're holding tension. That's a sign of tension. And so you would want a relaxing diaphoretic like Boneset to address that. And you can use it in a few different ways. Most diaphoretics work best as a hot infusion, okay? Boneset is really bitter tasting, and it's really quite bitter tasting. And maybe one of nature's great wisdoms is, you know how when you're sick, your taste buds go all crazy and nothing quite tastes right? Well, that way you can drink your Boneset tea and not be totally grossed out for it. At the time that you need it, you're not going to taste it in the same way it would taste if you're feeling very, very healthy. Some people say that actually when you need Boneset, it tastes really good to you. I've had people feel like that. I've also had people that didn't feel like that. But I think that having your taste buds be a little bit less refined when you need it, it definitely helps you get it down. If I'm making tea with it though, I usually mix it with something else. So I put Boneset in there, and then I might put lemon balm in there, I might put some mint in there, something so it's not just the Boneset all by itself. Most of the time you don't only need a relaxing diaphoretic or only need a stimulating diaphoretic. Usually both patterns are going on, but you might need more relaxation if you're holding a lot more tension, have a lot more chills, you're curled up fetal. Sometimes you see people when their neck and shoulders are like that, oh, because they're holding so much tension. That's all inhibiting good outward circulation. It's inhibiting what your body needs to do to treat that fever. Relaxant diaphoretics are better. Other times the person is really lax and they're like dead weight on the bed and they're sweating freely. And we normally think sweating is good in a fever, but not if you're losing fluids and not if you don't have good outward circulation. So in that case, you would want to use a stimulating diaphoretic to get the circulation outward. And maybe if the person is sweating a lot, something like cinnamon, which will close up the pores and hold the water in and keep them from dehydrating. Cinnamon's especially good if someone also has loose stools and so they're losing water that way. Okay, but Boneset, you have this pattern, alternating fever and chills and this sore, achy feeling like you did way too much work or worked out too hard, too much yard work, or the aforementioned fell down the flight of concrete steps. It'll help to relieve the pain. It'll help with the chills and alternating fever. It's a traditional remedy for agues or intermittent fevers. And so sometimes people will get sick and they have this, you know, hot, cold, chills, heat, sore, achy fever, and it lasts for a few days and then they get better. And then like 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, a month later, they get the same kind of thing again and then they get better. And then time goes by, same interval, they get the same thing again, and they're thinking, what's going on here? Do I keep catching the same thing over and over? And what it might be is they have this intermittent condition where the way that the virus that's infected you is surviving is basically it flares up, and then when the immune system comes to attack it and get rid of it, it sort of goes and hides and lays low and waits for the immune system, lets its guard down. And then it looks around and says, oh, okay, cool, we can flare up again. Sometimes I think about that kind of virus or bacterial infections that can be like that, as being like, you know, the teenagers find this really great place out in the woods to go and have a bonfire. And so they go and they party and they have bonfires and they throw their bottles and they make a big ruckus and they're sort of disruptive to the environment. And then, you know, all of a sudden they see flashlights coming and you know that the police are coming to break up their bonfire party. And so the police catch some of them and take them away and tell them to go home, but a lot of them run off into the woods and hide behind the bushes and lay low. And they wait until the flashlights go away, they wait until the cars drive away, they wait until everything's quiet again, and then they stoke up the fire and start partying again. So Boneset does deep immune scavenging. In addition to being a diaphoretic, it also stimulates white blood cells at the core level, at the bone marrow level. And so very, very good for like using during those patterns for the deep immune scavenging to really get through and get that kind of infection out of the body. So you can do hot tea. You can also do the tincture, but add it to hot tea. I know that Paul Bergner has talked about using a combination of Boneset tincture and elderberry syrup. You know, two things that work on fever and influenza differently. The elderberry basically inhibiting the reproduction of the virus. Well, the Boneset is attacking it both through white blood cells and through the fever response. I think that that's a good thing, but I really do think that because hot water in and of itself facilitates the diaphoretic response, giving the elderberry syrup along with some kind of hot tea will be more effective than just taking syrup or just taking tincture and not consuming the hot fluids. If you think about just traditional wisdom in treating fevers, just keep the person warm, give them warm fluids to drink, hot soup broth to drink. There's great wisdom in that.